if you have already watched my first video and you're having any questions, then go ahead and message me or send a video response or whatever, and hopefully I'll get back to them. But I wanted to cover something I mentioned in my first video, mentioned briefly because I was going off in a almost small tangent. I didn't really get off into a tangent, so that was pretty good that I pulled myself back. But I mentioned libertarian purists, and I mentioned it in the context of the Libertarian Party. The libertarian purists may use language like, "You're not a real libertarian, they're not a real libertarian. You hold that view, then you must not be a real libertarian." They might say things like, "You're a statist," or "You're a sheeple," and they'll take it really seriously when they say it too. They might not even be joking, and they mean it as an insult. So, those are the types of people that I'm talking about. And I wrote a little thing on them on my blog a while ago, and so I'm just going to be covering that. So if I look like I'm looking up a little bit and not at the camera, then that's because I'm finding my place. But anyway, if you already, I'm assuming, know what libertarians are, since you, I'm assuming, watched my other video on what libertarianism is, then I'll just dive right into it. So, this term libertarian, with some people, rather than having a standard definition, is maybe synonymous with believes in the least amount of government/aggression possible, or ideally, in everything. So let's say you're someone who thinks that gay marriage, because you live in this world where the government licenses marriages, that gay marriage, they should have government licenses too, as well as heterosexual couples. If you think that, someone else may say, "You're not a real libertarian because that's more government." That kind of doesn't understand the issue, though, and we might have more issues with more layers to this, and you realize we may think, yes, government should be out of marriage, but while it is in marriage, so there are qualifiers, and things are sometimes more simple, and it doesn't make you whether you're a real libertarian or not, or whether you're holding to some libertarian pure ideal. Some people's libertarian pure ideal may be something like the NAP, or called the non-aggression principle. So, if you have common goals, but your goals don't line up with each other's precisely, rather than work together, you might just yell in the microphone. And I have an image of Alex Jones with this InfoWars microphone, like spitting a bunch of liquids out of his mouth, because he apparently yells up that loud and passionately. One thing that this sort of thing can lead to libertarian purism is cultish behavior, where you have your group, and with your group you may not have as good outreach if you don't understand the other point of view, and you aren't be able to come at that without your purism, you know. You might even be mocked and reviled by others, you know, like Alex Jones or like Westboro Baptist Church or whatever. And how are you going to persuade people? Well, you'll be able to persuade people more easily with similar traits and intuitive responsiveness, or people who already are predisposed to what you're saying, people who think that it makes sense. But some people who have held another view for a while, it's not so easy if you're just going to come yelling and being pure and just think you're having the moral high ground and that you're somehow more righteous because of it. So, I mean, one thing that having a cultish mindset can set you up to cognitive bias, because you have preset your opinions and you let your mind construct your world around them and what you already believe, rather than deciding with an open mind what you should believe going forward. You are less likely to make personal progress with yourself, but you'll still, our numbers are growing, it's all good. So this thing with ideological purism within libertarianism and purist attitudes, cult group attitudes, is a lot of times some of these certain people I tend to see can ignore real ethical dilemmas, or just not be very philosophical because they don't really understand all the different aspects and sides to things. So I'll just talk about the ethical dilemma side first. Now, if you believe in a very black and white viewpoint, like my viewpoint says non-aggression, if you have a different viewpoint on non-aggression, then that doesn't count because mine counts. If you do this, then you're committing aggression against me. It's not actually as simple as that, but let's just cover the ethical dilemma part first, speaking of black and white areas. How would you respond to the sort of Shalapon scenario made famous by Peter Singer, when your only obligation to others is to, quote, leave them alone? In this scenario, imagine that a daily route takes you by a shallow pond. On that day, on the route, you notice that a child has fallen in and appears to be drowning. To wade in and pull him out would be easy, but your clothes would also get wet and muddy, and you may be late for your appointment. So what do? Do you save him? Do you rescue the child? What about people further away? Do you have an obligation to help people who may not be directly there when you're crossing their path? Now, these don't have simple answers. I have some answers to them that are pretty libertarian, but I'm not going to say, oh, you have no obligation to the child. It's not that I believe there are rights or obligations in the first place that are objective, but I'm just saying that I wouldn't just straight up say, seem like I'm saying don't save the child, and you say, oh, you have no obligation. Sounds like you're saying almost, go ahead, don't do it, I don't care. And if you're like that, then should I worry about you? I mean, how consistent are you? Like, maybe you won't aggress against me, but will you be an asshole and not save me? I mean, it's kind of like that, but besides real ethical dilemmas where libertarians certain pure libertarians may answer so as to not appear that they're giving ground to positive rights, like you have to act to pull someone out of the pond. There you have a positive right there, or Rothbard, who said when you have a child, you have no obligation to the child, because that would be positive rights. You don't need to be their caretaker. What if situations where you appear to, quote, need to carry out violence against another? I don't often come across those sorts of situations, but there are probably several both realistic and unrealistic examples. There are examples in my favorite means of communication, film, like movies. Now, maybe I've taken it too seriously, but sometimes certain acts of violence people commit seem to be justified in film. Besides self-defense, sometimes the vengeance or the retribution, people say, yes, I agree with that, they got what was coming to them, and people say that. Or, what you do to people who are basically criminals. You have to commit some kind of violence against them, which may not be self-defense. Do you put them in a cage? Do you just shun them? I mean, what exactly do you do? So, there are dilemmas, you see them all the time, that aren't exactly black and white, and I think a lot of times some libertarians will ignore them and other different viewpoints, different philosophical viewpoints. Oh, is the phone ringing? Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! That's it.